Hello, welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. My name is Danielle Mullings, and today I'm delighted to be representing Caribbean Girls Hack, and I'm excited to be having a discussion about tech and tech careers with Nanjira Sambuli, President of Transform Health. Talking Tech is a series celebrating girls and women in tech being recorded around the world between Girls in ICT Day 2020 and Girls in ICT Day 2022. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of each April. In 2021, Girls in ICT Day was held on the 22nd of April. The objectives of Girls in ICT Day are to help to create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in the growing field of information and communication technologies. The Talking Tech series is brought to you by the ITU, UNICC, and the Office of the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, and is in support of Equals, the global partnership for gender equality in the digital age. Caribbean Girls Hack is pleased to be a partner on this session today. The goals of the series include to interest and inspire girls and younger women with information about a range of ICT careers that can be had. 2, bring a broader audience, some of the role model women in tech, and share information about their career journeys and work. 3, offer diverse examples of how ICT is being used to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and other UN goals. 4, showcase initiatives that are working with girls to support them in ICT studies or future ICT careers. 5, provide girls and young women in tech with a leadership opportunity to represent and promote a girl in tech organization with which they're involved and promote it to a broader international audience. To kick this session off, I'm going to introduce you to Caribbean Girls Hack. Caribbean Girls Hack has been an amazing program that has connected young women across the Caribbean, all who are interested in ICT. There are a series of development sessions that we've all really benefited from. And I believe, you can be great in whichever field, but what it's going to fundamentally come down to is what kind of personal development, that's the bedrock or foundation for any career, really. And I think Caribbean Girls Hack has done an amazing job there, as well as putting on hackathons, regional hackathons, that allow girls to team up, come with their ideas, and win awards and prizes based on their interests. And for more information, you can find us online. It's very easy to find us on social media. That being said, we're interested in seeing a more gender-balanced tech sector. That's something I'm passionate about and working towards. And I'm now delighted to shift the conversation to Nanjira, again, President of Transform Health. And we're going to start off by just asking her to just introduce herself really quickly, and then we'll go into the questions.
Thanks, Danielle. Hi, everyone who's watching. It's so much fun to be able to have this conversation with Danielle and hopefully with all of you in this new virtual world. So as you've heard, my name is Nanjira. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I have one interesting hat on my tech journey, but mostly I am a researcher, policy analyst, and strategist at the intersection of tech with society. I look at issues of how tech is impacting society from the perspective of governance, to culture, to gender, to entrepreneurship. Basically, I'm really, really curious about how we write the story of tech impacting our lives, and especially for those of us who are not from the West. Let's put it that way. I'm passionate about curating the world of opportunities for us to think about new jobs, new roles, new thinking, new questioning. That's been my jam. As far as official hats go, as you've heard from Danielle, I am president of a new coalition called Transform Health. That's really trying to be a global movement of actors in digital health to make sure we get it right. And, we're living in a pandemic, and so that couldn't be more timely. Other hats I wear include being a fellow at Ford Foundation, a Ford Global Fellow. I'm also a fellow in the Tech and International Affairs program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Basically, these are just spaces that allow me to do the thinking and then the writing and speaking about these issues I just pointed out. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Nanjira. As you can see, it's a very accomplished person we have with us today. And we want to ask her, when and how did you get into technology? What was your journey like?
My journey, if I were to summarize it in one word, is curiosity. It started, obviously, like everybody else, as a user. In that in-between generation of digital natives and immigrants, if you will, my first mobile phone probably got just before I got to high school, but then went to high school, didn't have access to it, so on and so forth. But starting to work on it curiously was around 10 years ago, when here in Nairobi, there was a new sort of tech boom happening. We had like cheaper internet sort of finally happening thanks to government policy, and a whole new world of tech innovation was emerging. And a space called the iHub, one of the first innovation hubs to be set up in this movement of innovation hubs across the global south, was this curious melting pot of entrepreneurs who were interested in building solutions, tech solutions for society and the Kenyan society. A bunch of us were very interested simultaneously in writing and blogging, which is really, I would say, the first place. It sounds like many of us start there now. Started with blogging, just everybody observing and giving their commentary to issues. But I personally got very curious about how the entrepreneurs were going to be coming up across insights to determine, for example, if they want to build an app for farmers, have you spoken to farmers to figure out whether they have the devices you're thinking of building for, what their concerns are, and so on. And so a bunch of us came in and started what was the iHub Research Department, where we really brought insights to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs to the community, so to speak, really just cultivating a world of knowledge to understand and bridge the gap between what's happening on the ground, if you will, and what the potential and promise and perils of technologies were. So I started on that research track, started getting more curious about what's happening upstream, how government's making policies. Started with my home government here in Kenya, started looking at how that's playing out across the continent, largely through a network of hubs called AfriLabs as well. And now I've sort of gone even further upstream, and I'm thinking about how does it all come together? We are so interdependent now in a digital age. A guy in a hood in Silicon Valley can create an app or can switch an app. For those who use Twitter, you'll know this. Your font just changes because one person just goes boom, and that's it. But what are the impacts to the rest of us who are not directly creating? So I've really now been looking at how do we make sense of it all on a planetary scale? How do you create rules in a digital world where the digital innovations don't follow jurisdictions the way we know them? How does the government of Kenya hold a tech company accountable, whether it's in digital health or social media? So those are the big questions I'm sitting with. How do we think about security of systems that we're using, such as ID systems or platforms like Zoom and Teams and everything else? What are these key questions that make sure we are all getting more benefit than harms from these technologies? So that's been my journey in 10 years. The one thing I'll add to that is it's not been anything that were jobs or titles that were put there. Been sort of been making it up as I go along. But I like to hope that as I look back now, there are a few more people who feel there are new paths that have been opened because of people like me who are making it up as we went along.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful to think about because it has created more jobs or more, cross sections of industries that persons can think about. So that being said, what do you like best about your job or technology?
There's something you said earlier that is so true. I think it's really about the person. And so my personality, I think being true to it as a curious, noise-making, rabble-rousing element has made my job or my journey so interesting so far, because finding ways to channel it, whether it's through writing, whether it's through talking in various sessions, platforms, you name it, I sort of figured it out as we go along. We've been writing roles as we go with it and stepping into those that are more determined or established, if you will, but still being true. So for example, one of the most interesting ones has been in 2018, from 2018 to 2019, serving on the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation. I think I was one of the youngest, if not the youngest person, or one of the younger ones, one of the few young women, when you hit all those representation boxes. And it was a very interesting space because you're dealing with very different perspectives. Those who've worked in the analog world, if you want to call it that, who follow very different procedures. Those of us who see the world in a very new light, and especially from this lens of digital, being able to speak into that, feed into that, and be very adamant about some of the things I was passionate about seeing in our report was really gratifying and a real test of, I feel like a litmus test for how far we've advanced in saying that global tables can be inclusive. And what that means, is it just having bodies in a room, or does it actually extend to the work and actually the final product? So that was a really gratifying thing. And it's a watershed moment for me because that's what I want to be able to do and make more doors like those open. So it's like, hey, everybody, let's go through. We've opened this door, let's go through and let's keep it open and widen it some more. So I love that about the job, not so much the titles. It's really the spaces to explore. And I guess exploring uncharted territories is where I thrive.
I love that. So that being said, you mentioned uncharted territories. Do you have any activities beyond your job that you'd like to tell us about?
Wow. In a past life, well, now I can say it's a past life. I was a musician. I did that for the first part, early days of my career. So I did that like sort of on the side, which is to say it's so important to be able to nurture all sides of you, because however you concentrate them later in life, whether you settle more in a tech or sort of like 9 to 5 job or whatever you want to call it, you're a whole person or a wholesome person. I guess I'm still more of a geek because on my downtime, it's reading books. Fiction is life for me. And all around just hermit life. I'm one of those few people who, with the pandemic forcing us to be sheltered in place, it's been my jam. That's my element for the most part. Somewhere between reading, writing, nature. Those are my go-to elements.
All right. What's a lesson that you learned along the way that you'd like to share?
I think we've already been alluding to that, but it's really be yourself. The world will really try and define us. And this is so true for those who will be from what are called underrepresented backgrounds. And the question of why we're underrepresented when we are a majority is one we should always ask, so that we never just feel grateful to be a room, which in itself can be a form of censorship. You need to go into that room with a full knowledge that you belong in the room. It takes a lot, I will say. It's not just a confidence thing. It's the active cultivation and energy, sort of like preparation that you must do. And I feel whether you're working as a coder or whether you're working in policy like myself or anything in between, figuring out those wholesome elements of you and your curiosity about the world you live in that you want to see represented in a better light and understood for what it is, not the sort of rose-tinted glasses people may have about your corner of the world, is so important. It will probably come with titles and little narratives like you're probably the angry Black woman or you're too young. Do not let that get in your way. You are valid, belonging, and you represent a worldview that must be seen for what it is. That's been a very important lesson that I cannot even allow myself to stray away from, even if I tried. Even if I felt now, oh, maybe I feel more like in an established career. No, every day I really try and find ways to actively remember that. And so I hope that is passed on and understood by those who follow in these paths.
Yeah, I love that message of remembering that your voice is important, even if you don't see yourself in the room and you're the only one representing a region that you may be from. So that being said, so that's one challenge that you may have encountered as well and learned a lesson from it. But are there any other challenges that you've encountered along the way? And if so, how did you overcome them?
One interesting one I can think of right now is also this notion of being from a certain region. So being from Kenya means I should only work on Kenyan or African issues. It's been an interesting journey, especially in the last 5 or so years, challenging that and saying, if a tech bro from Silicon Valley can wake up and say, because they've crossed the Atlantic Ocean, they work internationally, who are we not to claim the same? And it's not this tit for tat thing, it's to say that enough of othering us. We may not be the ones who are the builders or the coders, but we are the consumers and we are the primary market everybody's scrambling for. So our perspectives should be heard, and creating narratives around that has been really challenging because you come across sort of pushback like, oh, we should be grateful for what folks are trying to do, especially in development sector, or you're too negative. Oh God, I hear that so much. When you're critical, you're negative. So that's usually a common one. And if you're not careful, you can start to believe that. But what that is that you're forcing people to contend with uncomfortable truths. We are, especially at an intersection of so many things that have been done right, but also done wrong, and whether people are willing to learn from those. Bringing those to complicate the narrative, as I like to put it, has a present continuous challenge, but trying to overcome it by sort of trying to learn the strategic ways to see how can you frame something to get a segue or to get that entry point in if you're dealing with people who would otherwise be like, you people are never grateful, or just being strategic and starting to understand. So it's a bit of like that political awareness about the world that has come before us to build the world that we're in and the one we're going into. It's a lot of work, and it's this subtle work that you can't really put to paper, but it's so important. It's really sometimes difficult to make it make sense. But that's been a present continuous one. I'm sure there's a couple of Twitter threads I've done over the years to just capture my wandering thoughts around it. But those are the unspokens, the intangibles have been really present continuous challenges. I don't think they're done. They're never really completed because the world would otherwise be a utopia. But those are, I think, things everybody can expect, and especially if you're really trying to bring diverse perspectives into what our understanding of tech is.
All right. So since this series is about girls and women in technology, do you have any career and/or tech advice for girls and younger women?
Wow. Stay humble, stay curious. It sounds so cliche, I know. But those as your bedrock or foundation will actually even allow you to create things we have not considered yet. I think there's space for so many people in tech. On one part, it is valid to say girls and women in tech should be those in the tech industry, as a friend of mine has written about, trying to hold that name or title for the engineers and the coders and those who were really doing the infrastructural element. But those of us in the broader sense of it, in the policy, in the lawmaking, in the lawyers, the doctors, everybody who's now interacting with tech has a valid stake in this. I think the advice for anybody who's trying to get into it or progress in it is really bring those elements to it. I think that's where we are headed now. I'm not thinking of tech as separate, but as foundational. So if you're in health, for example, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a systems administrator, if you're a doctor, you need to probably understand tech more. If you're a systems administrator, you need to understand the politics of the health system so that you know what you are sort of encoding or digitalizing, so to speak. So there's a lot of that interchange that we need to do. So create spaces that allow you to have those interactions, read widely, question loudly, and you'll be surprised at what you're able to even envision that has not been envisioned yet.
All right, so those are all the questions for you.
Awesome. Well, I have some for you too. So yeah, first of all, you're already very accomplished, which really jazzes me to know. But tell us a bit about your journey and where you are right now, how you got into where you are doing awesome stuff.
Definitely. So first, I'm based in Kingston, Jamaica, everyone. Big up all the yardies watching. But I started in tech I was little, to be honest, from prep school. And that would be the youngest, well, after nursery and so on. That would be the youngest level of schooling at the primary level in Jamaica. I remember I just loved computing class. Like at first we started out with buzzers. I had to go and press the right buzzer and I was just enjoying myself and always racing the teacher and saying, miss, I think I can learn this before you can teach it to me or so on. And we're just going back and forth. So I always loved my computing teachers and we got along very well. And I think that kind of relationship with the industry was kind of built into high school. And I was supported by, women in tech initiatives and programs that I would join that also helped with my personal development and allowing me to go to a tech conference abroad as well. And I also met Caribbean Girls Hack here, which was also been a developmental space that allows me to network there. So from prep school straight up, my two interests have always been with technology and then with like film and the media side. So I'm actively exploring both since I've come to university, where I'm now studying software engineering as my major and film studies as my minor. I guess I've taken it to another level now, where I saw the Young Experts Tech for Health, this Global Youth Tech Council, being advertised. My friend sent it to me and she was like, you should try out, you should apply. At first, I was a bit skeptical because I was saying, this looks big, how are they going to select me per se? That was my frame of mind at that point in time. But I'm so happy that I decided to take a chance and do it, because I think that has now expanded my one interest area into digital health, which was not an area I was thinking of before at all, because I don't really interact with digital health here. And two, also looking at now the policy side of technology and how does it affect people. And all of that is just so fascinating to me now. And of course, working with Transform Health from a different standpoint, helping them with partnership management and so on. But all of it comes together really to be informing this idea of how do we move forward, especially given the pandemic with digital health. So technology has always been a long-standing part of my life, and I'm so excited to just continue and see where the journey takes me.
It was so amazing. I don't know if those who put us together had realized we had the common confluence that's the Transform Coalition. It was so awesome to discover that our different paths have gotten us there. So tell us a bit more. And I love that you've done, like, you have the film and tech and digital health. That's exactly what I was talking about. What personally excites me about having all these awesome talent coming into this pipeline. Tell me, or tell us, some of the things you're most proud of, excited about, where you are and where you're headed, actually.
All right. So some of the things I'm most excited about. One, I think growing in the international space, because it has, like I said, it's just expanded my brain and way of thinking to, not only be thinking about how can I, build an app or build software that impacts a certain region, but also now being very mindful of how interconnected the entire globe is and how you build something one place, maybe it's going to affect the region as well or so on. I'm most excited as well about the policy side. In fact, I find myself being even more interested in the policy side and the frameworks behind it than the coding. I mean, I love coding either way, but I'm just getting increasingly interested in that behind the scenes framework setting kind of work. That's where I see myself headed in the next few years, to be honest. I'd like to do a master's in probably, I don't know if there's a digital health master's. In fact, I've been doing some research to find some. I found something that's really close in like Geneva, etc. So I'm going to work my best to get a scholarship or so on to do a master's in somewhere related to global health, digital health, etc., etc. So that's where I see myself going. Also, just finishing, I'm an undergraduate student now, so finishing my degree. What I also like about technology is how it intersects with just any and everything in your life, right? So for example, I also serve as the president for the student body here at the university. And I'm constantly like building out dashboards. I do surveys and so on to get student feedback. And then using my data visualization internship that I just did, I'm like building out dashboards with the student responses. And, you know, when you take the advocacy from a tech or a data-driven perspective, it shows and it's different. So definitely all of these intersections, I think, will just work hand in hand and put me exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Exactly. I love how you came back to that, because what's so important for all of us to remember is in a world organized in silos, you know, there should be a master's degree that you find, but what if you figure out that somehow between film and digital health, there's something about telemedicine as not yet envisioned that you should create? You could either find a master's program that's generic and then create your own specialization as your proposal, or you could just challenge the world out there and tell them, you're not ready for me. How do I create a program that gives you the credentials? That's the kind of thinking I feel like you all have, that energy that's coming into it with that. So that's really awesome. And I can't wait to see how that shapes up. I'm just curious. I mean, we had this interesting conversation before this one about challenges. And it's always tricky because it feels like it's always a thing that we must talk about, but it is. I was just, you know, the similarity of some of the challenges you've faced, even in this stages that are still very exciting. Are there some you'd like to share and the lessons you've learned from that, or how you've been overcoming or dealing with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, firstly, there's just that general one of, you know, it's a more male dominated space, especially out here in Jamaica. So, you know, my classes are going to be predominantly males. Like you can probably count on your hand the number of females in the majority of the classes. I mean, it's a bit more balanced coming into university, but definitely straight throughout, especially for high school, or if I'd ever do any, you know, tech programs or so on. I remember there was one engineering program I did one summer, and there's literally 2 girls in the entire program, you know? So it's always going to be that challenge of, you know, not necessarily seeing yourself and, you know, wondering if, or rather other persons saying, boy, you know, you're the only person here, or you're the only girl here, the only woman, etc. Are you supposed to be here? Because personally, I think I'm somebody who, I don't necessarily tune into what the room looks like. I just kind of step into the room anyway. But after persons start to say it over and over, you're like, oh, wait, that actually is, you know, the reality or the setting that I'm in. And I think that that has also been mirrored somewhat in the international space. You know, I do speaking events or, you know, different sessions I may be asked to come to, etc. And probably the only person from the Caribbean, you know, only woman or only Black person or only, you know, all of the different categorizations and diversity boxes are just ticked by virtue of me being there. So definitely, I think I've learned to, you know, even if I don't see myself in the room or see other persons that look like me in the room, that doesn't mean that my voice is any less important. In fact, it may mean it's more important because you're bringing a perspective that has not been heard, has not been thought about. And to be honest, I think the more I step into that is the more events I get asked to do, or the more people say, whoa, that's such a perspective that we've never had, you know, the opportunity to engage with before or so on. You know, let's bring her back. She really has something different. But overall, I'd like to see more persons though coming through. And so it's, you know, how can I also help my peers access some of what I have been blessed with and been able to access in the space just globally. So overall, that would be just, don't be afraid if you don't see others that look like you in the room. You're just the door or the window for more persons to come through. Outside of that, I think, you know, resources are always going to be different dependent on, you know, where you grew up and where you're from. I think that that's also a major hindrance that I see some of my peers may have, because for a computing degree, you're going to need a laptop, you know, or you're going to need it essentially. I mean, you know, you can utilize one here and there, but overall, it's much easier if you have your own. And those who are able to be exposed to more technology overall may have that greater uptake. So definitely, I think also just equalizing, you know, leveling the playing field overall, generally speaking, in terms of finances and how our economies and, you know, family structures are set up, I think would be a move I'd be looking to see as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it shows there's a ways to go. Just reminded me that one challenge slash, I'll call it a frustration too, is when you still find the spaces in rooms where you're the only, right? The only this, the only that. It's also somehow on you to know the others, which on one hand you can, but I can't know every Black woman on the continent, right? Or on the globe for that matter. And so part of what I've found as a way to say, how do we find more Danielles? How do you find more Nanjiras? Is where possible, and this, I think it's important to preface it, find ways to lend your voice. I mean, for me in my era, it was Twitter, right? Twitter was the tool, and LinkedIn, if you will, through which we were discovered as, or presented ourselves, and how I've discovered others across networks, so that it's not also just about always being the only one and the go-to, but you're able to say, okay, actually, I know that going forward, if I have digital health and youth issues, there's Danielle. Hopefully Danielle knows another Danielle, and that network is created. And especially now that we're living in such a virtual first world, which is a new paradigm shift, where possible, I understand fully because I've worked on issues of the digital gender divide. It's obviously that more women have been knocked off spaces online, either because they can't afford or other duties precede the time they would allocate to this. These have become very real challenges that we must remain present and aware to, or of rather, but still that we need to show that we are there, we're legion, we're legion, even if we're fewer in terms of statistics or other. But I'm very passionate about making sure that that network effect is created and we don't, as individuals, lock ourselves as the only representative, the only spokesperson. Because that label is not one that you'll end up burning out. You end up speaking to things you probably have no expertise on and you shouldn't touch. So that's another life. Just remember, that's a really important guardrail to put. As the last question, Danielle, let me flip this one. What would be your message as a young woman in tech to older women in tech? I feel like it's always the other way around. Rather than say your message to young people, you sort of already shared your experience and that will resonate, obviously. I'm curious about what you would say to those who are up further along in their journeys, people like me.
For those who are further along in their journeys, I would say it's important to be intentional about creating spaces to engage the younger persons, because of course you may come across those who are, open and, helping you develop and so on. And there are other spaces where they may be a whole lot, like harder on you overall. And there is room for that sometimes in terms of, building, your resilience and skill sets, etc. But I think overall, if you see young people around you, stop and talk to them, listen to their ideas. A kind word goes a far way, but ensure that you're intentionally engaging that group around you. Because I think there are many times that the older persons will assume that because you're younger, you don't have as much experience. And, even sometimes when we come out of university and we're seeing all of the jobs requiring 5 years experience, and we're like, where are we supposed to get the 5 years experience? We just finished university. So I think it's so important to take a chance on young people because many of them are amazing and have great ideas. They just need someone to believe in them and just kickstart that ripple effect.
I love that. So important. Personally, I find that we need to change the concept of mentoring from this speaking at people to conversations like these. I've learned so much from you in our interactions towards this already. I'm so excited about where that goes, but it's not taking that ageist approach, And so I think hopefully there'll be a lot more future conversations like these that also show that there's another way to come at it, which is conversational and mutually reinforcing. I learn from you, you learn from me, and creating spaces like that. Else, that's it from me, Danielle. I don't know if you have any other last question, but else, that's it from me.
Yeah, I think this has been a beautiful session. And I like the emphasis particularly on, it being a two-way street of communication because, most relationships are like that, generally speaking. And that's a good way to look at mentorship as well. So I want to thank Nanjira Sambuli so much for speaking with me here on this Talking Tech series that wraps up our session today for Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. I've really enjoyed the chat and I thank all the viewers that have tuned in to watch. See you next time.
Thanks, Danielle.